I was promised an extension cord. I need that extension cord. Hi, everybody. I'm Tiffany. Okay. And this is an old college laptop, so the batteries, it dies, and we need to make sure it stays plugged up. All right. And let me share. Okay. I think we're good now. All right. So, hi, everybody. I'm Tiffany. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. I talk low sometimes. I'm really shy and I'm an introvert, so it's kind of weird on the speaker, but it's a thing. Um, and so I just want to welcome you to Don't Hide Your Mistakes. First and foremost, I want to say what an honor it is to get to speak at Indie Design Week. As you heard in my bio, I have a graphic web design degree, so I started as a designer. So getting to be the opening keynote here is just very much an honor. So today we're going to talk a little bit about embracing imperfection. So spoiler alert, I'm good at this now, but I wasn't always good at it. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And I'm going to take you through my branding journey. So as you heard in my bio, I have founded and branded 3 companies. And so for me, it took 3 tries to get really familiarized with the idea of making my imperfections a part of my brand. And so when it comes to branding, we typically think about it in a way. I'm just setting my timer because I like to talk, y'all. I won't be here all day. So when we think about branding, we typically think about it as folks who are designers and developers. We're a little bit more technical in how we think. And so what that means is when we think about branding, we think about things like strategy, positioning, messaging. We are just very technical. If you ask us what a brand is, we're not going to just tell you it's a logo. We'll be like, well, brands have strategy and they have positioning and messaging. And I found that we think of it that way. And the rest of the world, when it comes to branding, they think a little bit more organically. They think of a brand as a reputation, kind of how people think about you when you leave a room. And I find that with both these ways of thinking, whether you're more technical like us folks, or you're like the rest of the world and you see it more organically like a reputation, we all somehow lose the essence of what a brand truly is. And a brand is just a story. And so when it comes to branding, your brand isn't just any story, it's your story. And when it comes to companies, it's a company story. When it comes to branding our clients, it's the client story. I find it weird, but although we have these 2 ways of thinking, whether you're technical or more organic in how you think, we all fall into the same trap. And that is when it comes to creating a great brand, we fall into what I like to call the edit trap. And all that simply means is we understand that storytelling is a part of branding, but for some reason we feel, well, let's just rewrite the story to make it better so that we have a great brand. And so in order to do that, we hide our imperfections. So we don't talk about our mistakes. We avoid the struggles that we've been through. We don't share those. And we definitely don't like to talk about the messy parts of our story. And so we think that that's going to be the secret to great branding. And I did too. It took 3 companies for me to learn that it wasn't. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. The fact that we think it's going to be the secret to great branding, and instead we end up in a space where we have a brand where we don't recognize ourselves, and that's because it's not their story. And so we find ourselves wearing a mask 24/7, like Dwight here. I don't know, do we have any Office fans? Raise your hand. No fan of Office. Okay, you guys are my people. So, like Dwight, we have a mask for we have a disguise for our brands. We also start to feel inadequate because we've created this brand where we've made this perfect picture, but we're not perfect. And so we compare ourselves to that and we feel inadequate. And then lastly, we minimize ourselves because all the stuff that we take out, imperfections, mistakes, struggles, messy parts, that's the stuff that makes us us. And so little by little, we take ourselves out of our story. And so that's what we're going to get into today. I'll tell you guys a little bit about my journey, founding and running each of those companies, and what I learned about imperfections and what I hope to pass on to you when it comes to including those in your brand. So before we get there, I figure that we need to all agree on a few things. So we're about to spend an hour together, and if we're going to go on this weird journey of embracing imperfection, I feel like we all have to get on the same page. Agree? Awesome. So I have like three, I don't really want to call them rules because I'm a bit of a rebel. So we'll just say agreements. That works. So the first agreement we all have to come to is at least for the next hour, I would encourage you to do it the rest of today, but at least for the next hour, you have to all agree that everybody in this room, everybody online, you guys too, we're going to embrace our imperfections. And what that simply means is it's Indie Design Week. You guys are excited. It's the last day. It's the in-person moment. And we all showed up wearing a little bit of a mask, even if it's just you showing up as like your best self today. So I'm going to encourage you to drop that and just be normal, imperfect you. Second thing that we'll have to agree to is obviously I'm going to tell you my story. But I do want to break the rules. If you came for an opening keynote where I just talk for an hour, you just sit there, that's not today. I get it, bamboozled you. I got you here, and I just told you sorry. But there's going to be moments where I want to hear from you. I want to hear your story. And so when those moments come, don't be, scared to share your story. So whatever fears you have, please put all these to the side. Don't worry about having to raise your hand or wait for your turn. We're not doing any of that today. We have a small room. My virtual guys, drop some stuff in the chat when you have those moments. But take this moment to really try embracing perfection and just try it out. It's going to take you through tries. Hopefully, it doesn't take you through company. Hopefully. But if it does, at least you have to start here. And the last thing we all have to agree to is it's okay to laugh today. It's okay to have fun. There are more gifts. There are more. We have to them. And it's gift. So all my gift people, today it's gift. Next hour it's gift. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable embracing imperfection. Even for me, doing it up here. And that's okay. So we can have some fun together to make it less uncomfortable. So, one last thing before we move forward. As I said, today we're going to try out embracing imperfection. And so, I'm not going to get into the deep end and be like, tell me your life story. I need to hear it right now. 30 seconds, go. We're going to start off with just a little softball question, a little bit of fun, and it's just going to prepare us for how the rest of the day is going to go. So, I'll ask the question. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. You guys just seem to be a good crowd that you'll head nod at me and let me know when you're ready. Hopefully that works. So don't worry about raising your hand. Don't worry about waiting your turn. Don't worry about what anybody's going to think about your answer. We're having fun today. So I'll ask the question, give you a few seconds to think about it. Then I'll count down and then the floor is open to go. And I want you to be as loud as possible. I want to hear the answers. It's going to sound a little chaotic at first. That's okay. Embracing imperfection is a bit chaotic. So we'll go with it. So here's the question. And my folks that are virtual, please drop this in the chat too. And if you want to drop it in all caps so it's loud, do that, but don't do that. I don't know. So, simple question. If you had to eat one food for the rest of your life, what would that be? And we're developers, we're designers, we're UX people, we're specific folks. So I don't want answers like Mexican food. No, you have to say burrito, taco, something. It can't just be generic to get yourself out of it. It can't just be ice cream. It has to be something like mint chocolate chip. Where are my mint chocolate chip folks? Yes, again, my people. Favorite ice cream from a kid, my thing. So, has everybody thought about it? I can give you a few more seconds, some head nods. Okay, let's go. I want to hear it. One food, rest of your life, what would it be? Okay, Hot Pockets. I like that. Angel hair pasta. My people, yes. Anything else? Any more foods? Ice cream sundae? Yes, I love it. Chalupa from Taco Bell, specific. That's what we came for. So, the other moments today where you have opportunities to share, I want you to be just as confident. I want you to put it out there the same way you did. I want you to wait for the moment to talk. So, today, I'm going to give you 3 things that I want you to remember about embracing imperfection. And I put this on the screen because I'm a person, I like to know what's coming next. I don't want to just be thrown in. So you know what's coming next. If it doesn't make sense yet, I promise, hopefully by the end it will. If it didn't, I don't know. So let's get started. So the first thing that I want you to remember when it comes to embracing imperfection is that mistakes create connections. So raise your hand if you made a mistake before. Okay, my people, yes. So when it comes to mistakes, we all know what they are. But mistakes are simply you had a moment where maybe you made the wrong choice. You had a moment where you misjudged some things. And I don't know why, when it comes to the idea of sharing mistakes in our brands or telling clients to share mistakes in theirs, we freak out about it a little bit. And I think that's because like we get we're not perfect, but also it's like I'm not going to tell people what I messed up on. Like that sounds weird. So why we feel that way is because we have this concern that if we share our mistakes, it's going to create a bad impression. So whether you're more technical or whether you're more organic in how you think about branding, we all understand that brands create impressions. And so we're like, if I lead with mistakes, bad impression. Nobody wants that. And we have like these other little mini fears that sit underneath that. So we have concerns that, okay, I share my mistakes. Everybody's going to stop talking about the great things that I do. So, like our accomplishments, it's going to be like the Brady Bunch, where our accomplishments are in the room. That's Jan. And then our mistakes enter Marsha. And everybody just talks about Marsha. Marsha. That's going to be the mistakes. So, we also have this fear that for many of us, we associate mistakes with failure because oftentimes when we make a mistake, we failed. That's how we feel. And so we have these concerns, well, if I talk about my mistakes, then I'll be labeled by my failure. And like nobody wants to have two slices of bread on the side of their head being called an idiot sandwich. I don't know, it's a nightmare I have. I had to represent it in gift form. I just had to. And then the last fear that we have when it comes to mistakes is that we're going to be judged for our misjudgment. So oftentimes when we make a mistake, for many of us, that means that we made the wrong choice. We had a moment where we misjudged the situation. And so we don't want people like looking at us, side-eyeing us, shaking their head, like, what was that? We don't want that permanently associated with us. So that takes me to my first moment of telling you guys a little bit about my story. So as I said, I founded 3 companies. The very first company was Tag Studio. It was a branding and marketing agency that I founded pretty much right out of college. I lost my first real job that I got with my degree, and I decided to start a branding agency. And starting Tag Studio was interesting. I ran it for 4 years, and I did this thing. I made a lot of mistakes, but one that I often now talk about, took me forever to start actually talking about it, is that I decided, I'm like, okay, one person agency, who's really going to work with like one person? And what does that even mean? So I had this vision, like eventually I'll have a team and I'll have these people that work with me. And so I decided like, okay, we'll brand it like there's a whole thing of fake it till you make it. So I'll just brand it like I have this team. And so that's what I did. And so literally all the branding, all the messaging, all the marketing, everything used the word we. And that's why this says hiding behind we. Because I wouldn't say like I help clients, we help clients, da da da. And so that put me in this space where I started to make even more mistakes because it's like that first mistake led to just more. I kind of put myself into this corner. And so I have the we do this, we do that, that whole persona thing. And then, I don't know, I just stopped showing myself because I'm like, well, if it says we and then all the photos just have me in it, that's conflicting messaging. And yeah, I'm going to out myself, so I'm not going to do that. And so that's why I like this photo. That's my husband, Zane. He's here. He's my videographer for the day. And so why I like this photo is because this is a event that I did. And I went to go look for photos of myself at the event, and I couldn't find any. So I took no photos. I had nobody take any photos of me at my booth. And I think it's kind of a perfect analogy for what running Tag Studio was like for me. Like the pages and all that stuff is so up, so go look at that stuff. But there's like only 3 or 4 photos of me. They all say our founder. There's no ownership there. And then the last thing that I did after building this persona and not showing my face is I decided to just start talking funny. And what I mean by that is all of my career for the most part now, I have worked with entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, micro enterprises, people who like strategy and branding, marketing. That's not what they do for a living. They have the capabilities to understand that, and I've always felt that way. That's why I love working with them. But we're not really going to get anywhere if I'm trying to explain something to them, and then everything is just like word salad, tech language, all that stuff. But when you look at the messaging for Tag Studio, that's all I use. And I don't talk like that, obviously. Um, and so I found myself, I backed myself into this corner, and I'm like, okay, I don't know how to get out of this. And so that just got me even more and more into myself. Wearing this mask, I'm like Dwight, I got a different disguise for every day that I interact with somebody. And I just am like, okay, I don't really know what to do. And so I used to feel a lot of shame about that. I used to never talk about it. And it wasn't until I decided to rebrand and found my current company that I even started sharing. And so I had this fear that if I tell people like these mistakes I've made, I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be the branding and marketing person, and I'm messed up how I branded myself. And so I'm thinking, I'm gonna lose everybody. Nobody's gonna want to work with me. What entrepreneur is gonna trust me? And I started talking about it. And then I learned the power that sharing mistakes actually has. And so when it comes to sharing mistakes, why we should share them is because we think we share them, bad impression. Typically, the exact opposite happens, especially when you find your people. Mistakes are a great way to connect with people. They create what I like to call connection points in your brand. And all that simply means is you give people moments in your story that they can connect to. So, obviously, if it's your personal brand, that's what it looks like. If you're branding a company, moments in the company story that people can connect to. If you're branding a client, moments in the client story that they can connect to. And so I found that why mistakes work this way is simply because they do a few things. First thing, mistakes show the risk that we've taken. And so because of that, they let other people know, like, okay, Tiffany's a bit of a risk taker. Like, she took a risk or two. And so sometimes they've taken the same risk. And so that's something that they can connect to. Also, what it does is it shows people what risk we're worth taking. And so it kind of really lets you get to know a person by the risk that they were willing to take. So another thing that sharing mistakes I learned does is, well, mistakes teach us memorable lessons. I don't know about you guys, but if you're anything like me, then if I really want to learn something, oh, I have to make a mistake. I'm gonna make it a few times, but the idea is it'll stick with me at some point because I associate, like, I remember what happened when I did that thing. And so the same thing happens for others when we start telling them about the mistakes that we've made. And so something else that sharing our mistakes allows us the opportunity to do is, well, mistakes prepare us for what's next. If you really want to learn about me or learn about any of us in this room, you just have to look at the mistakes that that person's made. And so it doesn't always apply to the very next thing on your path, but it comes back around at some point. And so telling people about your mistakes, well, you're letting them know, hey, I want to connect with you. And I want to connect with you because I want to let you know the risk I've taken. I want to let you know the lessons I've learned. And I want to let you know, like, how all of those mistakes played into my journey and what was next for me. So it's going to be a scary moment for some of you. That's okay. We'll get through it. So I told you guys a little bit about my story and some of the mistakes I learned running Tech Studio, one of the biggest ones I made. And for some of you, that may have created some connection. For others, strategist brain in you is like, okay, I can see why people like you and feel connected to you. Well, you guys have the same type of things in your story. And so we're going to take a few minutes. I want you to think about a mistake that you can share that can create a connection point, that somebody else can feel connected to. Maybe there's a risk that you took with it that can be associated with that. Maybe there's a lesson that you learned. Maybe you can explain how it plays into your overall story. And so just like we did with the silly food question, I'm going to just take a few seconds, a few moments. I'll give you some time. And then when you got something, just like look at me and like give me that look. Like, Tiffany, I got this. Or nod your head, whichever feels more natural for you. So we'll take a few moments and just think about it. Some of y'all are giving me looks I don't know what they mean. So are we feeling good or we need more time? Yep, just a mistake. And don't worry about raising your hand. Don't worry about waiting for your turn. Just go for it. We're accepting the chaos of doing that today. It's a small enough group. We can do that. Okay, I'm gonna count down and then we're gonna go. But I appreciate your enthusiasm. That is me as well. All right, so I think we're gonna use this as a gauge that everybody else is ready. Okay, so all right, 3, 2, 1. Let's hear it. Mistake you made. Okay, overcommitting, self-doubt. Anybody else? Translation. Okay. Anyone else? Too long of a timeline. I've done that. I've say that one again. Hesitancy, yes, done that too. I found too long of a timeline and hesitancy, they play off of one another. All right. So just how you shared that mistake here, I want you to think about how can you start sharing that mistake and adding it to your brain and start talking about it. And I get it's gonna feel a little bit weird, but you can talk about a risk that you took with it. You can talk about a lesson that you learned. You can talk about how it prepared you for what was next in your story. So the second thing that I want you to remember today is that struggles build authority. And so when it comes to struggles, a struggle simply means that it took us a while to do something. It took us a while to achieve something. And so struggles can look everything from maybe you tried something, you just had to keep working at it, and then you eventually got it. Or maybe it's like me, you had to found 3 companies and brand each of those in multiple attempts, and then you got what you wanted. And sometimes struggles just mean that they're just moments in our story where life was just really hard. Life itself felt like a struggle. And so when it comes to struggles, we often have these fears of sharing them that, well, if I tell people about my struggles, it's going to affect my credibility. And so we have these concerns that, well, if I talk about my struggle, nobody's going to want to listen to my perspective anymore. That I struggle with something, and so I can no longer speak on that thing. I used to think that all the time. For some of us, we have this concern with struggles that, well, if I talk about my struggle, I feel like this imposter, I suffer from imposter syndrome, and it's going to be like Scooby-Doo, and they're on the mission, and they're looking for the imposter. So they're not looking for the ghost or the monster. They're looking for the imposter in the room, and they're going to walk over to me and pull off my mask and be like, ha, I found you, you're the imposter. I went between this one and then like the game imposter. I wasn't sure which one to go with, but I liked this better. I don't know. So the other concern we have when it comes to struggles is that if we start talking about them, if we start sharing them, many of us equate struggles to weakness. And as much as we say that we're into SWOT and strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, we're like, can we just stop SWOT at strengths? I just want to stop it there. Maybe opportunities too. But we have this thought process where we don't want to talk about the things we struggle with. We don't want to talk about the things that make us feel like they're a weakness. And if you don't believe me, I want to take you guys back. So everybody close your eyes. You don't have to close your eyes. But think about the last time that you interviewed for a job. And they probably asked this question. If they didn't, just think like they did. So imagine the question of what's your greatest strength? Many of us, we get very excited about that question. Like we've been prepping for that one. We're like, I hope they ask it. We straighten up in our chair. Like we're ready to go. We have 1,000,001 answers. Like greatest strength, I can give you 50. We're ready to go. Fire off. And then for many of us, we start to get this weird feeling in our stomach, like in the pit of our stomach. We sink down in our chair a little bit. We're like, I know it's coming because they asked us about our greatest strength. So obviously they're going to ask us, what's your biggest weakness? And if you're anything like me, you try to game the system and start racking your brain for a way to make one of your strengths sound like a weakness. Like, oh, I'm just way too dedicated at my job. I just love design so much. But that's how, because it's awkward, like it's weird to have this idea of, you want me to talk about like something I struggle with, something that feels like a weakness? This isn't Mean Girls. I don't have a secret that I'm trying to hide. Like I do, but I don't want to talk about it. And so that takes me to my second story of the day. This one's struggling in the spotlight. I really focused on names. I don't know, I just did. So as I said, I founded 3 companies. If you're just now learning that information and you've been here since the beginning, I don't know if I didn't say it right, you didn't listen, I don't know. So, as I said, I founded well, I don't know if I said that. I founded a nonprofit. It was called Indie Youth Entrepreneurship Initiative, shortened it to IYI, easier to pronounce. Um, and so when I founded IYI, it was at a time for me with Tag Studio where things just were, they weren't going so great. They weren't going so hot. And so I decided instead of focusing as much on the business that I wasn't enjoying, I'm like, I'll create a little passion project. It'll distract me for a little bit. It'll give me, like my creativity back, and it'll be fun. Well, what I did not anticipate that when I started talking to people about my little passion project, they would think that it sounded really cool. And then that would put me in the spotlight. I'm like, great. So to give you guys a little bit of bio on IYI. So I had this idea, very simple. I was an entrepreneur at the time. I have an entrepreneur in my family. My grandfather is actually an entrepreneur. By the time I came along, he was out of it. And he would do entrepreneurial things with me, but I just never got to really see what he went through. And I think about my bio, and I'm sure my granddad's bio was really cool because he was a carpenter in New York in the 60s, 50s or 60s. He got into the New York State Union, one of the first black carpenters to do it. And then within a few years left to start his own company. And I'm like, that takes a set of courage I don't know if I quite have, to walk away from something so secure like that you work so hard to get into and be like, I'm going to do things for myself. And so he did that business for, I believe, 30 years. My grandma didn't have to work. He completely fed his family. My mom is one of 3 siblings, sent kids to college, all that stuff, all doing this work. And so I'm like, man, I just wish I could have those conversations with him. But I digress. So when it came to IYI for me, I was like, well, I didn't get that. I didn't get this experience or exposure to entrepreneurship, but maybe I can do that for some youth. I can do that for some teens. So I had this really cool idea. I'm like, I'm going to do a half-day workshop. It'll be fun. And I have a panel of entrepreneurs. And so before I knew it, the half-day workshop turned into a 3-day in-person summit that had sponsors and was partnered with a really big nonprofit here in Indy, and had support from the Kelley School of Business. And I'm taking all these meetings and pitching, and I've gone from this, I want to tell kids about entrepreneurship, to this very elaborate mission of, well, I want to expose youth to entrepreneurial thinking so that they can solve problems in the world and find their passion. And it had metrics and data that we tracked, and I'm just like, okay, this is cool. Got it. New form of exposure and celebrity for me. I didn't get with Tag Studio, but also this is really scary. And so, as I said, I am shy. I'm an introvert, and as you see from this photo, I ended up having to speak at things. And I think this event in particular, this was my first event. I found out about this 2 days before, and I want to say the audience was 500 people. I was just like, oh, great. And not only that, it was teens and parents, and they were learning about this very prestigious program that Lily and IUPUI do together. And I was there to convince them to also have their kids sign up for my program too, just in case they didn't make it to the Lily program. And so for some of these parents, they had a very distinct view of the path for their child. And I had met the organizer of this event somewhere, found out about what I was doing. I had a whole committee for my business as well, so it was my first time running an organization where I had other people and it wasn't just me. And so he found out about me. He's like, hey, I want you to really speak at this event. And I'm like, okay. And I did all right. And so that kind of was the experience of IYI. It was just several moments of being put into things that I felt like I wasn't good at. I've never described myself as a good salesperson, which is kind of funny because I sold shoes in high school. That was my first job. And I'm like, I'm more of a personality person. I'm not a salesperson. And so IYI forced me to learn to pitch, because if you need sponsors, you have to tell a sponsor, hey, I need you for something. And so then you have to also be honest about your needs. And so that's another thing for me. I don't like asking for help. Just don't. And IYI put me in this moment where that's exactly what I had to do. I had to start asking for help. I had to start leading with that. I had a committee, so I would have to like, hey, I want to do this, guys, but I don't know how to do that. And so IYI was this really cool experience for me that showed me the power that talking about struggles can have. And that is, when we talk about our struggles, we often think it's going to take away from our credibility. But it does the exact opposite. It actually gives us credibility and authority. And we're all brand makers here, so we know the power that having brand authority has. And so why that is because when you talk about struggles, well, struggles are the thing you have to go through first to get to a strength. And so when you start being open about those struggles, you literally put yourself like in the position, you alley yourself to talk about strengths. And why that is because with struggles build resilience. As I said when I was first introducing the idea of talking about struggles, well, oftentimes when you struggle with something, it means sometimes that you just have to keep working at it. So you don't have to try to, well, you just have to have faith that the way you're going is going to get you what you want. And so I'm sure life has taught you all that. When you have to do things like that, that is resilience training 101. Sometimes it's 102, 205, it gets hard. Another thing that sharing struggles does as well, struggles challenge our creativity. And I say that because when we share struggles and when we actually struggle with things, if you think about it, for many of us, you have to make multiple attempts. Sometimes you have to try 4 times, 5 or 6 times. Sometimes you have to found and brand new companies to get like this whole branding thing. You have to make multiple tries. And so each time you try, it can't be the exact same way every single time. So you have to change it up some. Well, that's creativity in action. And the last really cool thing that struggles is, well, struggles uncover our passions. I told you guys a little bit about RYI and like struggling in the spotlight. I had to learn how to coach, learn how to talk to people. I didn't mention like I was the face of IYI, so although we had a committee, obviously if you're the founder of the nonprofit, it's who everybody wants to meet. And so I had to go from shy Tiffany to walk confidently in the room and explain, yes, sir, we need $10,000 from you. So um, it was a really cool experience. And I learned by doing IYI because it challenged me to do things I had never done before. Texting, I got to create this mask and hide behind this movie that nobody really cared about when they actually met me. Um, I couldn't do that with IYI. I literally just going full force into that. And so that's when I learned I was actually like, although I am shy, I like to speak. Which my husband in the back, that's probably not surprise him. He's like, you talk all the time at home, honey. That's not news to anybody. But I learned although I'm shy, I can get up here and be pretty comfortable talking to people. I also learned from this idea of teaching youth how to solve problems through business. I'm like, well, we can't just teach youth that. Entrepreneurs do that every single day, and that's something I'm now passionate about. And so that's the cool thing about struggles, whether it's making you do something challenging that you then find that you really love, or sometimes it's the multiple attempts and one of those you find out it works really well and you're like, okay, that's my thing. Like some of us here in this room, like you might be the go-to person at your job for a task because you're like, hey, I had to do that 50 times before I got it right. And so that's the cool thing about struggles. And so we're going to talk about some struggles, guys. Are we excited? I heard, oh my gosh, that's okay. So just like we just talked about mistakes, we talked about our hoops, it's going to work the same way. I want you to think about a struggle that you can start talking about that's going to build some authority for you. And that simply means it led to a strength for you. Maybe it taught you some resilience. Maybe it's helped you get more creative. And it might be the reason that you're like the go to person for something. Maybe it is the thing that just really helped you uncover, excuse me, a passion. Like me, you guys heard in my story, I love to empower women to create their dream business. Well, running my very first company, I created a successful company, but then I realized I didn't like it. And I learned that, you started a nonprofit passion project because that was your way of getting out of the company you didn't enjoy. So now it's a passion of I don't want women to have to go through all of that. And it's like, if I can meet you when you're in the struggle, we can work through this together. So you guys all have that. Hopefully I've talked long enough that you can think about something. Now I'll give you a little bit longer. So remember, guys, we're not worrying about raising hands. We're not worrying about waiting for a turn. In the chat, that shouldn't be an issue for you, but if it was, I've cleared that up, hopefully. So I want to hear it. Struggles, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Okay, I heard burnout, difficult conversations, saying no. Saying no is a big one, and that was a struggle for me too. Any more? Imposter syndrome? My people. So when I showed the Scooby-Doo mask, and you're like, she found me. So just like you felt comfortable to share that struggle here, I want to encourage you to start making that a part of your brand too, and start making that something that you talk about. And encourage clients to do the same thing. I find that oftentimes when we get our clients to talk about their struggles, it makes it so much easier to like write copy and position them because it makes sense why they love what they do so much. And so now we've made it to the last thing that I want you to remember today, and that is that messy parts give meaning. And so when it comes to messy parts, I'll be honest with you, this is not a Webster's like definition. This is not a dictionary.com definition. I looked it up. They have messy, they have parts, two separate definitions. They don't have them together for some reason. So I figured something out. But when it comes to messy parts, that simply means a time in your story where things were messy. They may have been confusing, may have been disorderly, may have lacked precision. And so sometimes that means like it's just a messy moment in your story. Sometimes that means we all have those moments in our story where like, it's not a straight line from A to B, point A to B. It like goes up and it loop-de-loops and it curves and you might have zigzagged a little bit, went back and forth. That's a messy part. And sometimes it's things like for me, for the longest, IYI felt like a messy part of my story because I'm like, it doesn't fit. Like the branding and marketing studio fits, that makes sense for people of how I ended up as a brand coach. And I have a consulting firm, but how do I fit this weird nonprofit project that I did? And, it went somewhere, and I'm like, okay, how do I actually fit that in? And then did it during a pandemic. So that was the part I left out about IYI. The summit that I was really excited about, it was 2020. Can anybody think of anything that happened in 2020 that may have had an effect on in-person events? Okay, no one? Well, it was COVID, people. It was COVID. And so we didn't do the in-person event. We did do a 6-week program that I was very proud of. And so the in-person event was supposed to have the youth come together into groups and create business ideas. I had to change up a few things to make it work for virtual. And so what I did instead was I had youth find social problems that they were really passionate about that were happening in their community. And then they created social enterprise ideas to solve those problems and pitch them. I quickly learned I was not their teacher, they were mine. And it was very fun. It was a very fun experience. But like I said, IYI for the longest felt messy for me. And I felt like if I included IYI in my overall story, I was going to run into the same issue that we all have concerns about when it comes to messy parts of our story. That IYI was going to be the thing that just, it didn't fit. And it took away from my overall brand, my overall story. And so when it comes to the idea of sharing messy parts, for many of us, we have these concerns that if we start talking about the messy parts of our story, well, it's going to change the way that people think of us. We'll go from, having smiles. I kind of thought that. I was like, okay, everybody will be engaged, and then I'll tell this, and then it's just like, what? So we feel that we're going to have this room of side eyes. We also have, for some of us, if you're an oversharer like me, the idea of talking about the messy part isn't the part that worries you. It's the questions that come after. Like, I'm a person, I'll tell you about the little messy part of my story. Ask no questions. Don't ask why I went that way. Don't ask what I did next. Nothing. You just have to wonder. It's a mystery. So for some of us, sharing the messy part isn't the issue. The concern is, well, what if they ask a question about why it was so messy or what I did? And no. And for some of us, we have this concern that if we share the messy part, it's going to take away from whatever the goal is with the brand. And so for all of us, when it comes to brands, we have goals. Personal brand, the goal is typically to get a job. For some of us, we have a very specific job in mind. And we're like, I'll have to look perfect for that. If they find out about this weird, messy part of my story, they're not going to pick me. For some of us, if you're an entrepreneur like me, the goal is clients, maybe even a specific client or opportunity. Again, talk about the messy part. Clients don't like that. No client, no opportunity. And for others, for many of us in this room, the idea of telling clients to share the messy parts of their story, we're like, well, clients have goals and they have things that they want to happen from their brands, and I don't want it on my conscience, or I don't want them to blame me when they share that little weird part of their story, and then all of a sudden they don't get the thing that they want. And so we each are like, I'm going to be like Squidward in front of the tombstone of my goals and my dreams and all of that, and just crying and like life is over. So that takes us to my very last story of the day. So this one is rebranding and embracing my story. And I'm going to be honest with you. Although the bio says like she was a paralegal, a graphic designer, a branding and marketing agency, then she had a nonprofit, and then she pivoted and rebranded, and she has this company. It wasn't that smooth. The jump from Tech Studio and IYI was very messy. And that's because, as I shared, IYI happened during the pandemic, is when we were supposed to be having our program. We had to change things, and then I ran that in the summer, the virtual program, and then the summer was over, and I didn't quite know what exactly I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to move forward with Tech Studio. I was like, I'm kind of over that. I got to do a lot more fun things with IYI, but that's not quite it. And so, do I have any like Seth Godin fans in the house? He's a marketer, and okay, you know who he is? Yay! So I'll face you because this is going to matter to you. I don't know about everybody else. So I had this really cool opportunity during the pandemic, after I was done with IYI, to take one of his masterclass programs. And for those of you who don't recognize his name, if you know the book, The Purple Cow, I think it is, or Find Your Purple Cow, that's him. He's written a ton of marketing books. I believe he's a writer first, and then like he just has this really cool marketing knowledge. So not only did I get to take his class for free, I got to meet Seth virtually, of course, because it's the pandemic. And I guess the people that I was in the program with didn't understand how cool of an opportunity that was. So there were only like 5 of us, and I did most of the talking because I'm like, I get to meet Seth right now. I have so many questions. And I remember being so excited about that program. That program was 3 months. I did 3 weeks. And then I was done. I was on my couch eating Oreos and watching Netflix, and probably, I think I might have reached the bottom of Netflix, actually. And so it was messy. It was just, I wasn't motivated. I remember calling my best friend, and I was like, I get it. I'm gonna get a graphic design job. I'm gonna fix my I'm gonna redo my portfolio. I'm gonna get a design job. And she's like, and how long do you think you're gonna last? I'm like, oh, it'll work. And she's like, it won't. I know you. It won't. Rethink something. And I'm like, okay, fine. And she's like, why don't you just start another business? And I'm like, I'm done with that. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm over it. And then I called her the next day. I think I'm gonna start another business. And so figuring out what Tiffany Atkinson Consulting, my current company, like, I really didn't know. I actually, funny enough, I started the whole idea of creating a dream business by writing out all the things I hated about the studio. And writing out the things that didn't quite feel right about IYI. Like, and so I decided and looked at that paper, and I'm like, okay, Tiffany, it's the opposite of that. And I had to think about it for a while. And so a few more things about me. I told you I'm shy, I'm an introvert. I'm also a bit of an overachiever. That is good and bad ways. I overachieve at good things. I also overachieve at bad things. Hence the 3 companies to get to this whole idea of embracing imperfection. And I'm also a procrastinator. It's a fun mix when I get really sad. It's fun. That's very interesting conversation fun for me. So I decided, like, okay, Tiffany, you're not gonna procrastinate this time. You're gonna do this. And I'm like, okay, so how am I gonna do that? And I decided, okay, well, whenever I would have outside deadlines from a client, like no matter how I was feeling, I'd have to snap out of it. and get the work done. And so I'm like, how can I create that experience for myself? And I decided, okay, I got it. I'm gonna make a video and put it on social media and tell my network what I'm doing, and then give them a launch date a month away that I have no choice but to figure out between now and then. Um, and so I did a bit more thinking before the video actually went up. I decided that if I was gonna start a new business, I wanted to help women that felt just like me. Because I'm like, if I would have had hope at any of those points along my story, I may have gotten where I am now sooner. I also decided that if I was going to do this, I had to like fully be me. I couldn't do any more of the whole beauty persona thing. I couldn't do anything of like any more of the fancy jargon and way like that I don't actually talk. Like I teach entrepreneurs basically brand strategy and business strategy. I teach them if they already know what they're doing. Just they need to know the terminology and how to go about it. And so I decided that if I was going to do that, like it had to be different. And I was going to have to just go all in on it. And so in order to do that, I'm like, okay, here we are. I have to be honest about who I am. I have to just go for it. And so I made this video. I started it very simply. I'm like, hi guys, I'm Tiffany. You know that already. Some of you know me from Tag Studio. Some know me from IYI. I'm done with all that. Like, Tag Studio is over. I'm putting IYI on the back burner. And I'm starting a new company. I don't quite know what that looks like yet, but I'll figure it out along the way. And so that's when I learned the power that talking about messy parts had. Because I thought this video was going to be comments, probably never at it. I got so many comments on LinkedIn. So many people are like, oh, I've been there. And I'm like, so happy that you figured that out too. And that's when I learned that when we talk about messy parts, it helps us grow. Messy parts teach us what matters most too. Because when things get messy, we have to make hard decisions. We have to decide, okay, which thing am I going to go with? And because oftentimes to grow, things have to get messy, it really shapes who we are. And so that takes us to our very last moment. I want to hear some messy part stories. We've done this a few times, guys, so I don't expect you to just think a little bit quicker. But, okay. Just like I shared a messy part, think about a messy part in your story that can add some meaning, not just for you, but also add meaning for others. Because that's what I learned. Sharing messy parts of my story, like that's kind of my thing. I share imperfections, I share all of it down. And I've learned that that really has helped other people find meaning in my story because they can identify with it. So I'll give you a few more seconds, and then I want to hear from you. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Let's hear some messy parts. Job not working, you said? Love it. Messy. You know, messy. I've been there. Anybody else? That was all of IYI. I was the planner, and I'm like, we have no plan. Yay! I have it over here too. Life interruptions. Those can be very messy, yes. Transitions to messy. So just like you shared that today, I want to think about how can you go home and how can you add that to your story? How can you add that to your brand? Get your clients to get messy too. It's really fun. I think it's a really cool things they've done. And if they don't feel like answering the why yet, that's okay. So today, we covered a lot of things. I talked for a long time. We talked today about why embracing imperfection. We think this idea that if we start talking about the imperfections in our story, it's going to make it where our story doesn't make sense. Nobody's going to want to learn about our brand. It's going to like end our brand. And so we talked about the inverse of why that's not true, and where instead actually embracing those things, telling people that those things is the secret to having a great brand. So we started that by talking about how mistakes make connections. We talked about how we think that if we talk about our mistakes, it's going to make a bad impression. And instead, we learned that no, sharing mistakes gives people a moment to connect with us. It creates a connection point in our story. We then moved on to talking about struggles and how they build authority. Many of us think we tell people we struggle with something, instantly our credibility is gone, nobody wants to hear from us. the imposter that we always feel like we are, and how that's not actually talking about mistakes gives us a chance to build our authority, gets us a chance to talk about talking about our struggles gets us a chance to build our authority and talk about our strengths. I was excited to get there, so I got there early. And lastly, we talked about the messy parts. We think we talk about the messy parts of our story, it's not going to fit. It's going to take away from the story. It might even overshadow it. And again, that's not true. We talk about the messy parts of our story. That gives our story meaning. We give people the chance to find their own individual meaning within our story, and just some cool things happen. So I'm going to be honest with you. Although I took you through a crash course today, there are no expectations on my end, and I don't want you to have it either. You're going to instantly leave, and it is only there and embracing imperfections. It's not going to happen. It may not take you 3 companies like it took me, but it might take you a few times. And so there's going to be a moment, might be later today, tomorrow, next week, 5 years from now. If it's 5 years from now, good job. I don't know what to say. But you're going to have this moment where you're going to have that feeling again that, oh no, I can't talk about this mistake. I can't talk about this imperfection. I can't talk about this struggle, this messy part. And so the next time that you feel that way, I want you to remember this quote. Tell the story of the mountain you climbed. Your words could become a page in someone else's survival guide. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope that I encouraged you to embrace imperfection a little bit more, to not hide your mistakes like the title says. And I hope I convinced you why it's the secret to great branding. So thank you guys. And if you want to connect with me, you can do that by the links there, and that's what the QR code is for. Get it, you scan the QR code, you get the links. Thank you guys.